All right, this is Jeff Zimmerman with FightNews.com. I've got Biaggio Ali Walsh, the grandson of the greatest Muhammad Ali. How you doing, Biaggio?
I'm doing good. How are you doing?
Good, good. You got a big fight with the Professional Fighters League November 22nd against the all-famous TBA, I would assume. Or do you know who you're fighting?
I know who I'm fighting.
Okay, okay. Well, we'll get to that in a minute, but I wanted to kind of start with this. Your family is in the boxing business. No bigger name than your grandfather, Muhammad Ali, your aunt, Layla, now a Hall of Famer boxing. You took up MMA. Why?
I gravitated towards MMA. I started watching the UFC early high school, and I kind of fell in love with the concept of, not the concept, but the fact that there's multiple martial arts that can have a play in a fight, so the karate guy versus the judo guy, or the wrestler versus the striker, and stuff like that, so I kind of just really fell in love with that idea. And I also, like, when Connor was fighting at featherweight too, and seeing how much he did for the sport as well, I just really gravitated towards MMA.
Which is interesting to me because you are part of that young generation, so that's not surprising. But as I mentioned, the family business, your brother Nico is on a nice little roll to start his boxing career. So did that impact you at all to just, I know you were a star football player in high school, played in college, but did seeing his success have any impact on you?
100%. He's my little brother, but it inspires me to see him do so well. And he puts in the hard work, and I've seen him put in the hard work when he was 15 years old. So yeah, it is inspiring, and I think we both just feed off of each other's energy.
Have you guys ever been in the ring together, put on gloves, sparred or anything?
We've never sparred, actually, but he had, like, 2020, obviously, when COVID hit, the gyms were closed and everything. So he would help train me in our garage downstairs. And yeah, like, we're very close, and we both are very supportive of each other too.
That's great. And you mentioned supportive of each other. I've gotten to know your mom and dad a little bit at the Nevada Boxing Hall of Fame. Great people. And I see your mom and dad, ringside for Nico's fights on ESPN. They're your biggest cheerleaders, obviously. What is it like having them in your corner?
I couldn't be more blessed and more grateful to have such supporting parents. There's a lot of people out there who don't have parents, and they have parents and they're not as supportive. I am in a situation where I do have very loving and very supportive parents. So I thank God every single day for that.
Yeah, and now you're obviously taking up MMA, kind of late to the game, right? In the mid-20s. What has been the toughest part about picking up a sport that, like you said, has so many disciplines to it?
I think the hardest part is just it's you have to get out of your comfort zone. Like, that's the one thing about MMA too. Like, if you're a striker, like, you have to wrestle, you have to grapple, because you're not in kickboxing, you're not in boxing, you're in MMA. You have to know multiple things. Staying consistent too, and being able to go to the gym when you don't feel like it and your body's just aching, like, I feel like the consistency is the hardest part.
Yeah, and obviously, being part of a boxing family, I would imagine your stand-up is probably your best asset.
I think I'm a natural striker. Growing up, me and Nico would kind of go around the neighborhood and ask kids if they wanted to box. So, yeah. But this camp, and even going into my last fight, that camp, I've only been grappling, and I really fell in love with grappling. So who knows? Maybe I'll choke some guy out.
Obviously, you got those genes, right? But getting on the ground, that you don't see a lot of boxers, for example, get into MMA, right? It's a totally different world.
Yeah.
Did you wrestle in high school or have any prior experience?
No, and it's crazy. I wish I did wrestle in high school. I feel like I would have been pretty good. But no, everything in my life has happened the way it's supposed to happen. And, like, wrestling and wrestling for MMA are different things. There's certain things can't do in wrestling that you can do in MMA. So when I got into MMA, even striking, right? Like there's a distance difference between boxing and like MMA striking. So everything that I did when I went to MMA was all adjusted to MMA. The jujitsu that I did was all jujitsu for MMA. The wrestling
Mhm.
for MMA. The
Right.
striking for MMA. So you know, and another thing too, I was actually just talking to my friend about this too. I feel like 40 years, like 20 to 40 years down the road in the sport of MMA, a lot of people have a base that they come from. They used to wrestle or they used to do jujitsu or they came from kickboxing. I feel like in the future of MMA will actually be the base for a lot of fighters. So when somebody's asked, what's your base? Are you a kickboxer? Are you a wrestler? Are you jujitsu? A lot of fighters will be able to respond and say, "Oh, well, MMA is my base." Because I go to the gym and I see little kids in gis, and then that same kid is doing kickboxing.
Mhm.
So, they're doing MMA basically.
Right. Right.
So I feel like in the future of the sport, MMA will actually be the the foundation or the base that they come from. Like that's their background. And that's kind of what I did. I jumped right into MMA. I didn't get any amateur boxing fights. I didn't do any kickboxing fights. I didn't wrestle in high school. So I feel like that's going to be the future of the sport.
It's interesting that you say that. I did wrestle in high school, and we recruited football players like yourself that were just athletes and teach them a few moves, and they would dominate. But to your point, wrestling has long been, a lot of All-American wrestlers
Mhm,
that never had a stand-up game in their life, became MMA fighters. So it's interesting to hear your perspective.
mhm, 100%. And uh there's a lot of champs that are wrestlers too. Like I always think, oh, I wish I wrestled in high school, but the wrestling that I'm going into is all wrestling that's for MMA. That it goes back to that difference.
Right. And certain moves, like you said, may work in a regular wrestling match, may not carry over or vice versa.
Exactly.
Yeah, very, very, very interesting. And obviously you thought about this and, do your homework. Now, you're in Vegas. I know you're based in Vegas, home of the UFC, right there in their backyard. I would imagine, and I know you're at Extreme Couture as far as the gym, but what kind of folks are you working with on a daily basis? I would imagine you have access to some of the best fighters around.
Oh man, it Extreme Couture is stacked with fighters. Any day you can see Charles Oliveira come in or Anthony Pettis or any of these big name guys, come in. And it's cool too. And I'm very blessed and grateful that I'm in Vegas and I'm at that gym, because you get to work with some of the best fighters in the world. And it only makes you better.
Yeah, no doubt, no doubt. And what kind of advice what kind of advice has anyone given you, or something that they said to you that's really stuck out to you?
My head coach Dennis Davis said that, going into my second fight, he said, it's what you do every day. Like the crowd, the lights, the strangers' faces in the crowds. It's all an illusion. At the end of the day, it's me, the ref, and another guy. That's what I do when I'm sparring. Sometimes we'll get in the cage and we'll spar, and we'll have like a ref there too. That's actually to make it seem realistic. It,
Right.
it's literally that.
Wow.
And it's
Wow.
helped me stay calm too, because every fighter gets nervous, you get that anxiety and whatnot. And especially, if you're like a late fight on the card and you're in the back and you're watching all these fights, you can hear it and everything, and you're like just anxious. At the end of the day, man, it's what you do every day.
So I cover boxing, and to your point, and you see Canelo walking out there so calm and eating the crowd up. I mean, there's a skill set to just maintaining that composure, I would imagine.
100%, 100%. And again, the more experience that you get is only going to help. The fact that I'm fighting for the PFL and Madison Square Garden in November, like that's throwing me into such big exposure at a very early stage in my career. I'm still an amateur. So if I'm used to that kind of stage now, imagine 4 or 5 years from now, I'm going to be so used to it. And I'm grateful for that. Like, I'm so happy for that.
What is your goals, Biaggio? And once again, real quick, Jeff Zimmerman, fightnews.com. What are your goals, and what is kind of your goals with the sport? It sounds like you're in it for the long haul.
Yeah, I'm just into it. I want to make a name for myself. I want to make my own legacy. I want to win that belt, and I want to be a martial arts guru. A lot of the coaches that I have at my gym, I look up to. They're great guys, and they kick ass. You know what I'm saying? They preach martial arts, and I want to be like that.
And you talk about legacy. Nobody beyond boxing, but just worldwide, no one's had a bigger legacy than your grandfather, even to this day. I was fortunate to go to his 70th birthday party in his hometown of Louisville a handful of years ago. Knew some people very close to him, and worked with Richard Steele, who knew your dad, gave him one of his biggest breaks in boxing as a referee, doing some fights, some amateur or exhibition fights, I should say, years ago. So, but let me ask you this, though, because I heard a Ken Griffey Jr. interview recently. I don't know if that name rings a bell, one of the greatest baseball players of all time. Went through some dark stages as a teenager. Now, your last name is Ali Walsh, but it's not Smith. How has it been kind of just growing up? Did you ever have any issues or just the pressures of, carrying that legacy of your grandfather?
Not growing up, we always kept it a secret. We never went around, and even today, like, I don't go around telling people, "Oh, I'm Muhammad Ali's grandson." Nobody cares like that. That's what I think, but
Well, yeah.
Growing up, we never really told anybody, so I didn't really have that much of a pressure. It was like freshman year when it got out on Max Preps, which is like a website for high school sports.
Right.
It got out on Max Preps, and then everybody started finding out, and then that's when I started to feel a little bit of the pressure, but it introduced me to that pressure at such an early age. So I'm just glad that everything in my life has happened the way it has.
And even with your mom, obviously being his daughter, it never got out before that.
Yeah.
Wow.
Like, I mean, well, my mom's, it's kind of, people kind of knew, because she does speaking engagements,
right.
And she travels a lot, and she helps find a cure for Parkinson's disease and
right.
stuff. So my mom, it might be different, but like, it didn't really happen to me until like freshman year of high school when Max Preps picked it up.
And your grandfather got to see you play football, if I recall, in high school.
Yeah, he got to see me run a 92-yard touchdown. It was awesome.
How excited was he?
Oh, he was excited. His eyes lit up, and I'm just glad that he was able to see a game and see me score like that.
Yeah, that's pretty cool. And we'll wrap up here in a second. Talking about your grandfather and the fact that his two grandsons, one of them's taken up again the family business in boxing, Nico, and now you're taking up mixed martial arts, which, God, it's so much to that sport. What would he tell you both today, or what do you think he would say to both of you?
Stay humble. That's one thing he would say, and that's actually the biggest piece of advice that I have taken from him, is just always stay humble. My grandfather, obviously, he was a very big trash talker and came off arrogant a lot, but it was for show and it was to sell tickets. Outside of the ring, he was like the coolest, nicest, sweetest guy you'll ever meet. Never said no to a photo or an autograph. Always shook people's hands, traveled the world, and acted like they were his family. So that is the one thing that I think that he would tell us.
Would he be okay with both of you taking on boxing and MMA, you think?
Yeah, I think so, yeah.
Yeah, that's pretty cool. I know
he's watching right now, so yeah. I'm sure he's happy.
Yeah, No doubt. Well, before we forget, obviously you got a fight coming up, so I don't want to, take away from that. November 22nd, part of the Professional Fighters League. You said you know who you're fighting. Who is that? And
It's November 25th.
oh,
It'll be
okay, November
Black
25th.
Friday. Yeah, and I
Okay.
do know who I'm fighting.
Okay, and who is that?
His name is Tom Gracer.
Okay.
hmm
Do you know anything about his style or what he brings to the table?
He's got a very unorthodox, unique kind of style, but there's certain things that I've seen, I've taken notes on this, and there's certain things that he does that I'm gonna just try to capitalize off of.
Is he more of a stand-up guy too, or does he like to go to the ground?
I think he's more of a stand-up guy, and I like that too, because I like to stand up and bang, but I've only been grappling too, so I'm in love with grappling right now. So if he does try to take me down, good luck. I might take him down. Anything can happen in a fight.
And you are amateur now. How long do you think you'll last as an amateur before you turn pro? Is there a timeline with that?
I would say maybe end of next year, I'll be ready to turn pro. But right now, I'm just trying to get as much experience as possible. And I want to fight after November, I want to fight in February. And then after February, I want to fight in maybe April or something like that. I want to fight every 3 months and just stay active and get as much experience as possible. Then I think by that time, I might be ready to turn pro. I got to talk to my coaches because I listen to them.
Right. Makes sense. And you were schooled well, Biaggio. Well, listen, man, I wish you nothing but success. Like I said, I was blessed and honored to meet your grandfather, or at least be in his presence. And it was sure a thrill. Got to know your mom, somewhat, and dad. I interviewed your aunt, Layla, a while back. And before she went into the Nevada Boxing Hall of Fame, in fact, and then your other aunt who's doing stuff with Parkinson's as well. So it's been pretty cool. So I appreciate the time and
Thank you for having me.
Yeah,
seriously.
Yeah. So listen, we'll be following JeffZimmermanFightNews.com. Wish you nothing but success, and hopefully we can do this down the road.
Okay. Yes, sir. I'm looking forward to it.
Thanks, man.
Thanks again.